Well, this is Baruch Fleischman here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and that was Adi Ran. It was really great. It's a Breslov, was a great singer that when I was younger, I guess he's got old like me, so probably not doing that much. We're in the middle of the 8th principle. Let's go over the 8th principle, talk about what it says. The 8th principle is, this is the letter Ches, which is also the number 8. And the principle we're dealing with here is Ani Mamim, B'Ramuna Shalema, Shekol HaTorah HaMetzuya Ato B'Yadeinu, that all the Torah that we find now in our hands, Hi HaNesuna, the Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the same Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, Olav Shalom, may he, peace be upon him. How about that? So let's come over here and let's see where we left off. So we're going through some different ideas here, and this is where we're going to start. He says, the Mishnah was then publicly taught to the sages and revealed to all the Jews. Everyone wrote it down, and it was spread to every community. The oral Torah was thus preserved and not forgotten. The reason why our oral Torah broke the tradition of leaving the oral Torah unwritten, that is, oral Torah means that it has to be unwritten. In other words, you have to have someone who could intimately tell it to you. So that's a kind of a teaching. It's an informal teaching, but it's formal ideas, formal teaching. Let me not get too mixed up here. But over here, the Torah was written down by Rebbe, who is called our holy rabbi, he calls him. Leaving the oral Torah unwritten was because he saw that the number of students was declining. Now, this is the time after the Hadrianic Wars against Bar Kokhba. The land was plowed over. There was nothing left. Everybody was dispersed. And he says, new troubles continually arising, and the Roman Empire spreading throughout the world and constantly becoming stronger. The Jews were also, therefore, being separated, traveling to the four corners of the world. He wrote a single volume that everyone could have. It was something that could be learned rapidly and not forgotten. Our holy rabbi spent all his life together with his council, publicly teaching the Mishnah. Among the sages who were part of our holy rabbi's council were Rabbi Chia, Rav, Bar Kapara, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Hoshea. Besides these, there were tens of thousands of other sages who received the tradition from our holy Rebbe, who we call our holy rabbi, which we call Rabbi. Rav wrote then the Sifra, and he wrote the Sifri, which are both commentaries on Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, to explain and expound upon the main parts of the Mishnah. Rabbi Chia wrote the Tosefta, which Tosefta means in addition, to elucidate on other concepts in the Mishnah. Rabbi Hoshea and Bar Kapara likewise wrote brisos to explain the words of the Mishnah. Finally, Rabbi Yochanan wrote the Jerusalem Talmud in the land of Israel. He wrote it some 300 years after the destruction of the Holy Temple. So that's how long it took before we were living really more or less down to a thread in the land of Israel. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the last of the sages of the Talmud. It was Rav Ashi who wrote the Babylonian Talmud. He wrote it in Babylon, approximately 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan had written the Jerusalem Talmud. Both Talmuds, or also known as Gemaras, were commentaries on the Mishnah, explaining its depth and expounding all the new concepts that had been resolved in the courts since the time of our holy Rebbe. The two Talmuds, the Tosefta and the Sifra and the Sifri, all explain what is forbidden, and I read it backwards, permitted and forbidden, clean and unclean, liable and innocent, fit and unfit, all the opposites. It was all as it had been handed down from generation to generation, and ultimately from Moses himself. Rabbeinu and Rav Ashi were therefore the last great Jewish scribes to transcribe the oral Torah. Every Jew therefore follows the Babylonian Talmud. This is because every single Jew had agreed to accept the teachings of the Talmud, for it included the teachings of all of our sages, or at least the majority of them. They in turn had received the tradition regarding the foundations of the Torah from generation to generation, and ultimately from Moses himself. Now we go to the Yad Chazaka. Yad is also the number 14 because there are 14 sections here. This is a section on tshuva. He says there are in the category of those who deny the Torah a person who says that the Torah does not come from God, even if he only says this with respect to one verse or even one word. For example, if a person says that Moses wrote it on his own, then he denies the Torah. The same is true of one who denies his interpretation as included in the oral Torah. Such a person is then like Tzaduk and Baitus. At the time of the Second Temple, they were a movement amongst the aristocrats, the aristocracy of the Jewish people, to do away with the oral Torah. The Sanhedrin, the great court in Jerusalem, is the basis of the oral Torah. It stood as the pillar of law, and from it laws and judgments emanated to all Israel. The Torah assures us of this court's authority when it says, "You shall abide by the Torah according to how they teach it to you." This in itself is a commandment of the Torah. Everyone who believes in the Torah must therefore accept this court's authority and depend on it regarding all matters concerning our religion. One who does not believe in the oral Torah is counted as a heretic. If one openly denies the authenticity of the oral Torah, he is in the same category as all other heretics, people who deny that the Torah came from heaven, informers and renegades. All of these are not counted as Jews. This is only true when one denies the oral Torah on the basis of his own thoughts and opinions. He thinks he could do it better. This is the person who follows his own limited intellect and stubbornly denies the oral Torah on his own. He thus follows the footsteps of Tzadok and Baitus and their followers. But this does not include the children of those who go astray or their descendants. So it's a very interesting idea. This is that if I, for example, should take this position of Tzadok and Baitus, and what about my children? These are raised among the Karaites. So that's like the people who are raised, the Karaites, or Karaite comes the word Korah, which is the word for the written Torah, the written Torah. And that's what they hold by, that's all they hold by, and they deny the value of the oral Torah. So these are raised among the Karaites, and are convinced by their parents. That's what happens. So we see what it is, how important Jewish education is. Such people are therefore in the same category as a person kidnapped by Gentiles, which we call a tinuk shenishba, as an infant and raised by them. He may not eagerly abide by the command, but he is like one under constraint. I'm not sure what he means by constraint, but he's bound to be, I guess he means bound to be in that milieu of the people who deny it. Even though such a child may later find out that he's a Jew and see Jews practicing their religion, he is still considered to be under constraint, since he was raised in such a misguided manner. The same is true of those who follow the ways of their fathers who are Karaim or Karaites who have strayed. It is therefore fitting to bring them back and draw them with words of peace until they return to the strength of the Torah. Well, this is Baruch Fleischman. I'm going to try to bring in a little bit more music just to see if we can finish off that way. I got to push this button.